Okay, so think about this for a second. You know that woven pattern? Carbon fiber?
Yeah, that distinctive look.
Exactly. It feels like it's everywhere these days, right? I mean, way beyond just, supercars and stuff.
Oh, definitely.
You're seeing it pop up in high-end bikes, tennis rackets, even in some really advanced medical equipment now.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what's the deal? Why is this material suddenly so popular?
Well, that's pretty much exactly what we're digging into today. It's not just a cool look. There's some serious science and smart engineering behind why it's showing up everywhere.
Right.
So for this deep dive, we've gathered info from, quite a few places. We've got market reports on cars, a review on how it's actually made, a forecast for sports gear, insights into aerospace uses,
Wow. Yeah.
an article on medical devices, and even a paper looking at the challenges of, what do you do with it afterwards? The recycling aspect.
So a pretty broad look then, for everyone listening. Our goal here is to kind of unpack why this material is such a big deal across so many different fields. What makes it special? What's the future look like? But without getting bogged down in, super technical jargon.
Exactly. We want to pull out the really interesting bits, the stuff that's actually impactful.
Okay, let's do it. So starting right at the beginning, fundamentally, what is carbon fiber?
Okay, so at its absolute core, you're talking about these incredibly tiny but super strong threads, basically, filaments. And they're made of carbon atoms arranged in this very specific crystalline structure.
Crystalline, okay.
Yeah, think of really long chains of carbon atoms all bound tightly together. These little fibers are then woven or combined, usually with a plastic resin, to make what we call composite materials.
Oh, so the fiber itself isn't the final product usually?
Not usually on its own, no. It needs that matrix, that resin, to hold it together and give it shape. But the key properties come from the fibers themselves. They are incredibly light, really, really strong, and also very stiff.
So lightweight, strong, stiff. Those are the big three.
Those are the headlines, yeah. It's like thinking of, a spider silk, but on a microscopic level and way stronger.
Okay, I can picture that. So it's not just about being light. It's the strength that comes with that lightness.
Precisely. That strength to weight ratio, that's the magic ingredient. That's what lets engineers design things that are just, better than what they could build with older materials like steel or aluminum in many cases.
And you mentioned cars earlier.
Right. The automotive industry is a great first example, and it's covered in our sources. They often use carbon fiber composites, sometimes alongside aluminum, to get that mix, really high strength, without packing on the pounds. And that has big implications for, how efficiently the car runs.
Which kind of leads perfectly into the next question. Why are we seeing it adopted so widely now? What's driving this?
Well, a huge factor is this global push for lightweighting, especially in vehicles. The market analysis really emphasizes this. Everyone wants cars that get better mileage, better fuel efficiency, right? Makes sense for the wallet.
Sure. Less fuel, less cost.
And using lighter materials like carbon fiber is a direct route to achieving that. It simply takes less energy to move less weight.
And we're not just talking about shaving off a few pounds here and there, are we?
Yep.
It can be pretty significant.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Some cars have made really extensive use of it. Think about the BMW i3, that electric car. A lot of its core structure was carbon fiber to keep the weight down.
Ah, right. I remember that.
Or Audi uses it in parts of the structure for their A8 sedan. The basic physics is simple. Lighter car, less energy needed. That means better fuel economy for gasoline cars, or, crucially for electric vehicles, a longer driving range on a single charge.
And that ties into emissions too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just about fuel costs or range anxiety. There are regulations.
Exactly. That's another major driver the sources point to. Governments everywhere are tightening up rules on vehicle emissions. You've got things like the BS6 standards in India, which now include testing under real driving conditions, or new EU regulations pushing for lower CO2 emissions.
So manufacturers are kind of forced to find ways to meet these stricter targets.
Pretty much. And lightweighting with materials like carbon fiber is a key strategy. Lighter cars generally produce fewer emissions. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
And just look at the EV market numbers your sources mention. Global electric car sales shot past 10 million in 2022, then jumped another 35% in 2023 to 14 million. That boom is directly linked to needing materials like carbon fiber. EVs need to be efficient, they need range, and carbon fiber helps deliver that because it's light and strong enough for safety.
Makes sense. Okay, so we get the what and the why.
Yeah.
How about the how? How is this stuff actually made? It sounds complex.
It's definitely high-tech, but the basic idea is pretty cool, actually. It starts with what they call precursor materials. Usually, it's a type of plastic fiber called polyacrylonitrile PAN for short, or sometimes pitch fibers.
PAN, okay.
So you take these precursor fibers and you heat them up, like really hot. But then this is critical, you do it in an environment with no oxygen, zero oxygen.
Stop them from just burning up, I guess.
Exactly right. If there was oxygen, they'd just combust. Without oxygen, the intense heat basically cooks off all the non-carbon atoms. They leave as gases.
Ah, okay. So you're purifying it down to just the carbon.
Essentially, yes. And while this is happening, the heat and sometimes tension applied cause the remaining carbon atoms to arrange themselves into those long, tightly bonded crystal structures we talked about. That's what gives the fiber its strength.
Wow.
And it's worth remembering, like the sources say, that pan-based fiber is the workhorse. It makes up something like 90% of all the carbon fiber produced.
Okay, high heat, no oxygen, atoms line up.
Got it.
So we've got this amazing material. Where else besides cars are we seeing it make an impact? You mentioned a few areas.
Yeah, it's really spreading out. Let's stick with automotive for just one more second. It's not just about weight for fuel economy. It's being used in the actual frame of the car, powertrain parts, interior bits, exterior panels, all over.
Really? Inside too?
Yep. And that market analysis we mentioned, it predicts really significant growth. From about $24 billion in 2022, it's projected to hit over $64 billion by 2032. That's like an 11% growth rate every year.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
It really is. It suggests we're going to be seeing a lot more of it in cars. Now, switching gears to sports equipment, the forecast there is interesting too. The growth isn't quite as explosive, maybe around 4.5% a year, but the market's still pretty big. About $356 million this year, heading towards maybe $540 million by 2033.
And what kind of gear are we talking about?
Well, the report says sports sticks like hockey sticks, lacrosse sticks are actually the biggest chunk of the market right now. But you also find it everywhere in tennis rackets, badminton rackets, skis, snowboards. Basically, anywhere that being light and strong gives you an edge.
Yeah, that makes total sense. You want your tennis racket to be quick, but it also has to handle smacking a ball really hard.
Exactly. And just like cars, pan-based fiber is the most common type here, and apparently the Asia-Pacific region buys the most of this stuff. So, yeah, that fancy lightweight racket probably owes a lot to carbon fiber.
Okay. Cars, sports. What about aerospace? That seems like a natural fit.
Absolutely. Aerospace has been using carbon fiber composites more and more since way back in the 80s. At first, it was mostly for things like flaps or tail fins, secondary structures.
Right.
But now, it's core stuff. Fuselage is the main body of the plane and wings. The Airbus A320's composite tail was a big step. And then Boeing used a lot in the 777 and especially the 787 Dreamliner.
And the reason is weight again, I assume. For fuel.
That's the main driver, yeah. Fuel efficiency. Making a plane, say, 20% lighter can save a massive amount of fuel over its lifetime. One estimate suggested it could be around $1 million saved per plane.
$1 million?
Yeah.
Just from being lighter?
Over the whole life of the aircraft, yeah. Think about how much fuel an airline uses. So for passengers, maybe that eventually means slightly cheaper tickets, but for the airlines, it's a huge operational saving.
That's incredible. And it's not just planes, right? You mentioned space.
Correct. It's crucial for space applications, too. The research report we looked at put the space carbon fiber composite market at nearly $400 million in 2022, and they think it could reach almost $1.7 billion by 2033.
Wow. Another big jump. What's driving that?
It's things like the huge demand for satellites, think Starlink and others, plus more ambitious deep space missions, and also the rise of smaller rockets launching smaller payloads more frequently. All these need materials that are super light but can handle extreme conditions.
And I bet the standards are incredibly high.
Oh, absolutely. The source mentions the FAA has a specific aerospace grade certification. You can't just use any carbon fiber. It has to meet incredibly strict quality and performance standards. Makes sense when you think about the environments these things operate in.
Definitely. Though, one of the sources did mention, I think it was related to that plane fire incident in Japan, some questions about how these composite fuselages behave in a fire.
Yeah, that's a really important point and a valid concern. While carbon fiber composites have amazing benefits, how they react in extreme situations like a major fire is something the industry is constantly studying and learning about. It's complex, how the fibers and the resin behave under that kind of heat. Safety standards are always evolving as they understand the materials better. It's obviously the top priority.
Oh, so cars, sports, aerospace, and then the one that kind of surprised me was medical devices. How does it fit in there?
Yeah, it's maybe less obvious, but the applications are really fascinating and growing. Because it's strong and light, it's great for surgical instruments. Think about forceps or handles for scalpels. If they're lighter, surgeons might experience less fatigue during really long operations.
Oh, I never thought of that.
Like,
less hand fatigue for the surgeon.
exactly, which could potentially lead to better precision, better outcomes for the patient. Then there's orthopedics implants, like plates and screws to fix broken bones.
Right.
Carbon fiber implants are strong, durable, but also, and this is a huge advantage, they're radiolucent.
Radiolucent, meaning?
Meaning they don't block X-rays. So doctors can take clear X-ray images and see exactly how the bone is healing around the implant without the implant itself creating a big shadow or blocking the view like metal sometimes does.
Okay, that's a big deal for monitoring healing.
Huge deal. It's also fantastic for prosthetics, artificial limbs. Making them strong but light makes them feel much more natural and easier for people to use, really improving quality of life.
That makes sense. Lighter limb, easier movement.
And that radiolucency helps again in medical imaging equipment itself. The tables you lie on for CT scans or MRIs, often made with carbon fiber so they don't interfere with the images being taken.
Oh, clever.
Yeah. Plus, wheelchairs, mobility aids making them lighter and more durable. Orthopedic braces strong support without the bulk and weight. Even in surgical robots, carbon fiber parts can help make the robotic arms more precise and easier to control.
So the benefits are things like
DSAT.
better performance, patient comfort, clearer images.
Exactly. And the sources also mention things like longevity, the potential for customization, and, as we said, less fatigue for the medical pros. Plus, importantly, it's biocompatible. The body doesn't reject it, and it doesn't corrode. Crucial stuff for anything going inside the body or used in a sterile environment.
It really is amazing how those core properties, light and strong, find uses in so many different ways.
Yeah.
But, okay, it can't all be perfect. There have to be downsides, right?
Yeah.
Challenges.
Oh, for sure. There are definitely significant challenges. Probably the biggest one is cost. Making carbon fiber is, well, it's energy intensive. That whole high heat process we talked about takes a lot of energy.
Right.
So naturally, it ends up being more expensive than traditional materials like steel or aluminum, significantly more expensive in many cases. And adding to that cost is the fact that the process isn't super efficient. Remember the pan precursor. Only about half of that actually becomes carbon fiber in the end.
Wait, only 50%. So half the starting material is basically lost in the process?
Roughly, yeah. That low conversion efficiency definitely bumps up the price, so cost is a big one. The other major challenge is on the environmental side. Carbon fiber, well, it's basically plastic reinforced with carbon. It's not biodegradable.
Meaning it just sits in landfills forever.
Pretty much, yeah. It doesn't break down, and recycling it is tricky. It's not like melting down aluminum cans. The processes are complex and can be resource intensive themselves, so its end-of-life impact is a real concern.
High cost and tough to recycle. Those sound like pretty major hurdles.
They absolutely are. But on the flip side, that huge growth in electric vehicles we mentioned, that's also a massive opportunity. Because EVs need to be lightweight to maximize range and efficiency, the demand for materials like carbon fiber is just going to keep increasing. That demand could drive down costs eventually, and it also puts more pressure on finding good recycling solutions.
Okay, so the push for EVs might actually help solve some of the problems.
It could definitely incentivize solutions. And that research paper on recycling, it does offer some hope. There are ways being developed to tackle the recycling problem.
Oh, good. What kind of approaches are there? Is anything working well?
Well, there are a few main paths people are exploring. First, there's mechanical recycling. That's basically just chopping, crushing, or grinding up the old carbon fiber parts.
Okay.
The problem is that process usually breaks or damages the fibers themselves. So the recycled material isn't as strong as the original. You can reuse it, but often only in less demanding applications where super high strength isn't needed. It's more like downcycling.
Right. So it loses some of its valuable properties.
Exactly. Then you have thermal methods, like pyrolysis. That involves heating the material, again without oxygen, to burn off the plastic resin, leaving the fibers behind. Pyrolysis is actually used commercially to some extent.
Okay, that sounds promising.
It's better, but it can still damage the fibers, maybe shorten them, or leave some char residue. So the recovered fibers might not be quite top quality.
It's still not perfect then.
Not quite. But then there's chemical recycling, or solvolysis. This uses solvents chemicals to dissolve the resin matrix and free the fibers. And this is where things get really interesting, especially with something called sub- or supercritical fluids.
Supercritical fluids. Okay, now you're losing me slightly.
Huh. Yeah, it sounds pretty sci-fi. But basically, if you take substances like water or alcohols like methanol or ethanol and put them under really high pressure and temperature, they enter this weird state where they act kind of like both a liquid and a gas.
Yeah.
And in that state, they are incredibly effective at dissolving the resin without harming the carbon fibers nearly as much. Research shows you can potentially recover fibers that retain like 90% or even sometimes up to 98 or 99% of their original strength.
Wow, that sounds like the ideal solution then.
It definitely holds the most promise for getting back high-quality fibers. Plus, using things like supercritical water or ethanol is seen as potentially greener than using some harsher traditional solvents.
So what's the catch? Why isn't everyone doing this?
The main challenge right now is scaling it up cost-effectively. These processes require specialized equipment to handle the high pressures and temperatures. Building large industrial-scale pilot plants for solvolysis that are economically viable, that's the next big hurdle. But it's seen as a really crucial area for development to make carbon fiber truly sustainable long-term.
Okay, that makes sense. It's promising, but needs more work to become mainstream. Now, who are the big companies actually making and selling all this carbon fiber? You mentioned a few sources listed them.
Yeah, the automotive market report gave a good list. You've got major players like DowAksa, Mitsubishi Chemical, Toray Industries, they're a huge one, Nippon Graphite Fiber, Hyosung from Korea, SGL Corporation, Taijin Limited, Formosa Plastics, SGL Carbon from Germany, and Solvay. Quite a few big names.
And they're all competing, launching new products.
Exactly. The sources mentioned they use strategies like product launches, getting contracts with car makers, expanding their factories, making agreements, all the usual competitive stuff. Like SGL Carbon launched a new fiber last year specifically for cars with high strength. And Toray opened a new facility just last October focused on making carbon fiber for car bodies. So lots of activity.
And what about for the sports gear market? Similar companies?
Some overlap, yeah. Hexcel, Mitsubishi, Nippon Graphite, SGL, Carbon, Solvay, Taijin, Toray are on that list too. Plus others like Taekwang Industrial, Weihai Guangwei, and Zhongfu Shenying Carbon Fiber.
Okay. And for the European space market, that sounds more specialized.
It is a bit more niche, yeah. Some prominent names there are Airborne, Carbospace Tech, Oxyon AB, Peak Technology, RUAG Group, and SGL Carbon again.
Interesting. So it's a mix of these giant chemical companies and maybe some more focused players depending on the industry. It really paints a picture of how widespread this material has become.
Absolutely. It shows how fundamental those unique properties are and how much innovation is happening to make it better, cheaper, and hopefully more sustainable. It impacts so many things we use or rely on.
Well, this has been incredibly informative, a real deep dive, just like we planned.
Yeah.
So just to kind of wrap up the key takeaways for everyone listening.
Yeah.
We're talking about this material, carbon fiber, that's super lightweight but also incredibly strong.
Right. That's the core.
And that combination is why it's popping up everywhere. Cars, planes, sports stuff, even medical tech. It helps make things more efficient, perform better.
But it's not without its challenges.
No, definitely not. It's still pretty expensive to make, and figuring out how to recycle it effectively and environmentally is a big ongoing issue.
A major hurdle, yeah.
But the demand, especially with EVs needing to be light and aerospace always pushing for efficiency, that demand is huge and growing. And it seems like there's real progress on the recycling front, especially with those chemical methods using.
Very critical fluids.
Right. Those sound really promising for making it more sustainable down the line.
Exactly. It kind of highlights how developing these advanced materials isn't just about one industry. It links into bigger goals around energy saving, sustainability, and just pushing what's possible in engineering and medicine. It touches a lot of areas.
Which does make you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If carbon fiber went from being this exotic niche material to something impacting so many parts of our lives, what other advanced materials are out there right now, maybe just starting in labs or specialized uses, that can be the next big thing. What else might totally change how we build things or live our lives in ways we haven't even thought of yet?
That's a great question to leave people with. Always something new on the horizon in material science.